Hello everyone. Hi. This is another Johnny Harris. I just did the US versus China microchip semiconductor war. That was fascinating. And then I was going to stop and be done with videos for the time and decided I saw this one, and it's why submarines are way scarier than you think. And I decided I'm going to go ahead and do that, break it down into two 14-minute videos. 14 minutes, 14 seconds. That's exactly where we're going to stop it. And we're going to go ahead and start watching it in 6,900,000, 6,899,000, 6,898,000. Let's start over. 6,900,000. 6,899,000, 6,898,000, 6,897,000, 6,896,000, 1.
Enough nuclear power to destroy the human race several times over.
I need to show you a video that is blowing my mind. You have the ocean just sitting there being nice and calm, and then this pops out. Boom! It doesn't just pop out, it pops out for a second and it looks like it's just about to fall back down, and then
they fire off.
This is a rocket. Yes, a full-blown rocket that is headed for space. Oh, and
I've seen some of the things like the how they launch the missiles out and they shoot them up, and it's just enough propulsion to blast them up, and just as they're beginning to fall, that rocket kicks in and blasts off. I would love to see it in person, you know, with a dud. I don't want it to actually, you know, but it would be such a cool thing to see. And it is an amazing feat to me.
I know this kind of looks small. It's not small. And where is this rocket
Holy
being launched
shit.
from? Are there underwater bases? Yes, they're called submarines.
Underwater bases.
Once it gets to the surface, it flies 1,000 kilometers above Earth, literally into space. It starts looking at the stars to navigate and eventually falls back down to Earth, traveling up to like 12,000 kilometers to hit whatever target the people who launched it wanted it to.
Imagine if you were in the space station, right? You're just floating around and you're just talking, and all of a sudden you look up and you see a missile coming out and going down. You have to be thinking, well, some shit's going down now, isn't it? Because you gotta believe that, fingers crossed, it's just a test missile, but that ain't ocean it's landing on. That would be, oh, what if your communications were knocked out and there was some sort of a nuclear war happening, and it just happened? You're floating around a space station, all comms were knocked out. Is it safe to return? Because after you see that one, you would be seeing just coming from all over. That has nothing to do with this video, and I do apologize, but that just kind of, that just popped into my head.
Like, what have we created?
With such destructive power, it threatened the world. A deadly game of stealth.
An undeniable strategic deterrent.
Nuclear warheads that can wipe out countries.
Submarines are f***ing cool, I just gotta say it. They're these massive floating nuclear weapons that could be anywhere at any time that we use for psychological warfare and actual warfare and spying on people. And because of this, these giant vessels are actually incredibly stealthy. Like, you could be swimming in the ocean one day, minding your own business, and right below you, there could literally be this massive 48,000-ton metal machine with a couple hundred humans aboard, equipped with nuclear warheads that could be launched at a moment's notice. And you would have no idea, because not being seen is kind of their whole MO, which is nuts because these are some big boys. Like Russia's Typhoon class submarine. If you just pluck that out of the water and put it on land somewhere, you start to get a scale for how massive this thing is. Like a floating building. Yeah, these guys are thick. and they're cruising around our oceans 250 meters below the surface. Oh, and something we're going to talk about later, they literally have nuclear power plants on board, giving them basically unlimited energy to make fresh water and oxygen, which means they could be down here in the depths of the ocean for decades. That is, if there weren't humans aboard that needed to come up to eat food. Navies around the world who have submarines do everything in their power to ensure that these subs are quiet and invisible, even magnet resistant, all in the name of being undetectable. And they're always out there. Right now, in this very moment, there are tons of these things. There are humans on these multi-story buildings that are floating around our oceans with giant weapons in them. This is not normal. How did we get here? Why were these things invented? There's a lot to understand about submarines. There's a lot of angles we have been researching for months. And today, we are going to show you how we got here, what submarines can do, and most importantly, why?
One submarine has enough nuclear weapons to essentially end life on the planet as we know it. Just one submarine.
An increase in submarine activity.
Russian rearming their fleet, Chinese submarines, Iranian submarines.
They will preserve peace for many years to come.
Boy, today's topic is so juicy and there is so much to get through. Nick, our studio manager, is building something for today's topic I want to show you. But actually, first, I want to thank the people who made this possible. So thank you, BetterHelp. I've become a massive proponent of therapy. I wasn't my whole life. It's only a couple of years now that I've been in therapy, and it has truly changed my life. I am not saying that because BetterHelp is sponsoring today's video. I'm not supporting this video. Let's go check in on Nick. He's building something super cool. Okay, Nick, what are you up to? Oh,
yeah, it's coming together.
Look at this model. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's the SSBN Andrew Jackson Lafayette class. As you can see, all the pieces are out everywhere.
And these are the people. Look at the people. Oh my God.
If you look up here in the front, these are the bunks. These are the torpedoes.
Okay, we will check in with Nick in a moment as that model gets built. Let me tell you how we got here. People.
Once you meet with a TurboTax expert who will do your taxes for you, you're free to do.
We're going silent. Ads annoy me. But I'm not going to get the ad blocker because he won't get the revenue from it.
People have been building boats to try to go underwater for a very long time. Like, look at this old art where you can see Alexander the Great going completely underwater in a big glass barrel. This is like 2,000 years ago. 1,800 years later, you have Leonardo da Vinci, who was busy literally thinking of anything that could be invented, and he sketched up his very own version of an underwater boat. This beauty right here. It was basically like a big mechanical fish. Oh, and, this is wild, he kept these sketches a secret because he feared, quote, the evil nature of men who practice assassination at the bottom of the sea. Like, he thought that we might use these underwater boats for war. Whoops. Anyway, the first known boat to actually navigate underwater was, of course, built by a Dutch dude. Dutch, man, they're just so good at water. 150 years later, over here in what was soon to be the United States, George Washington paid for this sucker to be made for his army. I mean, there could be a whole video about this boat. The Turtle. Because it kind of looked like two turtle shells put together. So cute. The guy in there is just like so cozy. They tried to use the Turtle in their war for freedom against the British, but it never really did anything useful, and then it just sank. I mean, cool name, but it wasn't a super useful submarine. But it paved the way. 50 years later, we have the American Civil War, where the Confederate rebels built a sub that was powered by a bunch of guys manually turning a crank. And on board, it had a long spar torpedo. Don't be fooled though, spar torpedo was just a fancy way of saying a bomb on a 15-foot stick. And they actually used it. They snuck up on a Yankee ship underneath it with their bomb stick in the middle of the Civil War and blew it up, and both sides sank. Like, the submarine sank too. Like, it didn't work. I mean, it kind of worked, but it just didn't really work. Anyway, I had to...
I said ironclad because it sat so low, but that's a stupid answer for me because it was a boat. Anyone who listens to me, you should be fed shit on a shovel. All of you who are watching me right now. Yeah. Why are you doing it? Why am I doing this? Continue.
I mention all of these like early submarines because they kind of laid the groundwork, but in the 1800s things get really serious. Thanks to this guy over here in Germany, Rudolf Diesel invented an engine that changed everything. This new engine...
I was going to make a joke about it probably being called diesel, but I'm not going to. It's too easy.
Mixed pressure and air and fossil fuels that all exploded and made things move. This changed a lot of industries, but the Germans were like, let's put these in submarines and run.
They put them in submarines, and then Dale gas power came around, and boom.
Them to charge a bunch of batteries that we can use to power the sub while we're underwater. It's a lot better than the hand crank, and indeed it was. But there was one big problem, which is that this engine needs air. Like, it needs to be able to pump out the exhaust that it makes, and it needs to be able to suck in air to like make energy. So you can't actually run your engines underwater. So these German subs, as stealthy as they were still very limited because they could only stay underwater for like 48 hours max before having to come up and give away their position so that they could get air for their engines. This is a problem that will soon be solved, but we just need a few wars first. It's the 1900s, we have all these big empires that are looking for ways to destroy themselves with their new industrial technology, and they're getting good at submarines. They're loading them up with more and more batteries. Now they have sonar and radar capabilities so that they can like see underwater. And they have radios and encryption devices so they can talk to each other while they're underwater, which is everything when you're fighting a war. The Germans call these submarines Unterseeboats or U-boats, and they use them for their new plan of unrestricted submarine warfare, which is a sterile way of just saying we feel comfortable sneaking up on civilian boats and sinking them and killing the people without notice because we've decided we are literal villains.
Submarines aim and fire their deadly...
I never took the underwater for, you know, the U-boat thing. Never. I just learned. Maybe I'm stupid, but I just learned.
And always over them is the threat of sudden attack in the face of enemy submarines.
So yeah, being used for horrible means, but let's be clear, this is amazing technology. Like, this is light years ahead of the forefathers of submarines like the Turtle or that poorly thought out bomb on a stick thing from the Civil War. But they still have the limitation of air. They need to come up all the time to get air for their engines. No matter how scary and stealthy they could become and sneaking around underwater during these wars, they still have to come up to the surface every 48 hours to run their engines and recharge their batteries, giving away their sneaky position and becoming way less effective as a war tool. This would be like playing Battleship, but every few turns you have to flip your board around to show your opponent where you are for a sec. They kind of figured this out a little bit when they started to use these two little tubes that allowed them to kind of still be underwater, but to like put the tubes up and suck down air from the surface, push out exhaust, but it's kind of rubbish. Like, having to run your noisy engines every 48 hours was a huge limitation on how useful these subs could be. Well, of course, the war ends. Germany loses and surrenders. And some of these U-boats that were just sitting there were divvied up among the winners, the US, the UK, and the USSR, who discovered that, wow, the Germans have some amazing submarine tech. Let's use this tech to pimp out our own subs, leapfrogging decades of development. And this is where things get juicy and scary.
You're the guy with the gun, the person who would do anything to protect.
I'll just say props to Germany for being ahead of the curve so far with their tech, you know, for focusing on it for so long. And that's what allowed them kind of be ahead of the curve. So to that I say props to them. And props to the other countries for intellectual, what was it? Intellectual theft or intellectual property theft. Yay, thievery.
So now you have these two former allies, the US and the Soviet Union, looking at each other with skepticism. They both got their hands on this German tech, and they both know that the other got their hands on this German tech, and they both secretly are like, we need to get way better than the other at submarine tech. Let's go. This was a huge priority, but it was also weird and hush-hush. The Cold War. This begins an era of secretive investment into submarine technology, and this is where they level up to blow all of our minds, where submarines become the impossibly advanced machines that we know today. something that changed everything here was that humans had learned to tinker with atoms, breaking them apart to make incredible amounts of energy. And they used that energy to blow things up, but also to make electricity. And crucially, nuclear energy didn't require air. So it's the 1950s, and you got this guy. He's a Russian-born American Navy guy named Hyman Rickover. And he was like, whoa, wait a second. You're telling me that you can make electricity, but you don't need air? Light bulbs going off on this guy's head because he's a submarine guy. And he's like, let's slap these puppies into submarines. Yeah. That would solve all of our needing to come up to the surface every couple of hours problem. The US government's like, wait, sorry, what did you say, Rickover? And Rickover's like, I said, let's put the nuclear power plant inside of the submarine. We got to get ahead of the Soviets. He got a lot of pushback for this for obvious reasons, but he dug his heels in, leapfrogging all the bosses till he got to the chief of Navy operations and whispered in his ear his big idea, and it totally worked. The story of how this went down is insane, and Rickover was insane and visionary, and I'll leave some reading in the sources for those who want to go down that rabbit hole. Showing a lot of discipline here, just like breezing over this guy's story. But yes, it's the 50s, and the US government set about trying to put a full-blown nuclear reactor, a power plant, inside of their giant floating weapon. And they did, somehow, and it changed everything.
The arrival of nuclear power has broken those bonds.
Can go around the world on a core of uranium only slightly larger than a golf ball.
She may have just as profound an effect on naval strategy as the airplane has had on war.
Let's see how Nick's doing with his model. Oh, here we go. Look at this big boy.
Here she is.
Wow. I am going to put this model on my desk and look at it every day because it's beautiful and it's like retro, which is kind of cool. Anyway, let's get back to the story here because the next chapter here is really the chapter that matters most. Once they got the nuclear reactor onto these subs, everything changed. I'm going to show you why. So look at this big old submarine. It's a Sturgeon-class submarine from the 60s. It's a US Navy sub. And look, back here we've got the nuclear reactor. It sits back here doing its thing, breaking atoms apart, which produces an enormous amount of heat that can heat up water, that turns this massive propeller, and remember that spinning things gives you power, electricity. Boom, you're spinning turbines and now you have electricity for your submarine. Not only does the nuclear reactor not need air to work, but it literally creates air. After all, it's surrounded by H2O, so all it needs to do is break the two H's from the O and boom, you've got oxygen for your crew to breathe. I mean, this nuclear reactor was magic. Move over, trees. We've got submarines.
Move over, trees. We got submarines. 14:14 down on the clock, and I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to finish this gosh darn video. Who else finds this stuff interesting? I do. This has been pretty interesting. I don't know when this stuff will be up, though. I have a lot of videos right now in the catalog. So, burped off mic. And we're going to end this here. Like and subscribe.